Welcome back to 1834. McDonnell has come all the way back from being 4 games to 2 down to even out this 6th match at 4 games each, and it's the first to win 5 that will take the match, so the tension is extremely high because this is the decider. Today's guest commentator is Baldrick, so welcome back Baldrick. Now McDonnell has the white pieces for only the 3rd time in the last 9 games. There may be a very good reason for that, but I'll tell you about that later on. For now, McDonnell opens with e4 and we have c5, the Sicilian. Now Bourdonnais is saying here, I dare you to play f4, the Sicilian McDonnell attack. You've played this 14 times over the last series of matches and you've only had 4 wins, 1 draw and 9 losses. You'd be really absolutely mental to try it again now at such a crucial juncture. So McDonnell plays f4. We have e6, knight to f3, knight to c6, c3 and d5 into the centre, and McDonnell plays e5 walking straight past the challenge. Now last time we saw this position was in game number 5. Bourdonnais played f6 and McDonnell actually had one of his rare wins with this opening after 48 moves. And actually we have seen this f6 move from Bourdonnais quite a few times. So this time Bourdonnais tries something different. He plays f5. McDonnell continues with bishop to d3, planning to bring it back to c2, bishop to e7 and bishop to c2 as planned. Queen to b6 now, bearing down upon the kingside position, but McDonnell doesn't really mind, he just castles straight into it. Knight out to h6 and McDonnell moves to the side out of the way of the queen's line of sight. At this point, Bourdonnais takes the opportunity to castle, and we have d4 into the centre. Now, Bourdonnais could capture here, but he goes for development instead. Bishop to d7, getting off the back rank. a3 from McDonnell, heading towards the queen, and a5 in defence from Bourdonnais. Now here, Baldrick has heard about the latest thing. He's heard about some conflict in a foreign land, and he wants to show his support to all the people out there, so he's updated his profile picture because that will help a lot. h3 now from McDonnell, and Bourdonnais brings his light square bishop to the back rank, maybe hoping to come around here and pin the knight, but McDonnell just keeps pushing pawns on the queen side, and we have the first captures of the game. The pawn captures on d4, McDonnell captures back, and we have bishop to h5 pinning the knight as we suspected. McDonnell just develops his dark square bishop here, covering both of these pawns, and what do we have next? We have rook on a to c8 on the nice open file. Now here McDonnell plays a strange looking move, but he did the very same move back in game 5 and he won the game. He was in a very similar position. Rook to a2. What's he doing? Well, he's adding another defender to this bishop should the queen here need to move away. Bourdonnais now plays his king into the corner, somewhat like McDonnell did, and McDonnell gets his queen off the back rank to d2. Queen to c7 now, both players just trying to find some weakness in the other person's position. Knight to h2, perhaps trying to burst forward here, but Bourdonnais plays his bishop into h4, and we have rook to g1, again lining up along this sort of line, trying to get some action going here, and we have bishop to g3. And this is threatening the knight. McDonnell wants to keep it, so he brings it back to f1 and threatens the bishop right back. The bishop goes back to h4, and now we have queen to d3. Perhaps he's trying to get rid of this pawn and have a checkmate in the corner here. So Bourdonnais brings back his light square bishop to get in the way and prevent that sort of thing from happening, and McDonnell develops his second knight. Bourdonnais plays his other bishop back to e7 now, and we have QE2, the Queen Elizabeth move. Queen to d7, getting on the light squares, maybe trying to come around and help this light square bishop out, and McDonnell finally strikes with g4. Now Baldrick says that you should probably capture with the pawn here, but I don't think that's such a good idea. If you do that, the bishop's going to capture, and after the pawn captures the bishop and the pawn captures the g4 pawn, the black king is looking somewhat exposed. Maybe there's going to be a rook lift coming around, and there's also the queen coming across, these sort of ideas. So maybe not the best idea, Baldrick. Maybe try again later. Instead of this, Bourdonnais plays queen back to e8, as we suspected from the move to d7 earlier. And the game continues with g5. McDonnell is able to push straight past the f-pawn and threaten the knight. So what does Bourdonnais do with this? Well, he brings the knight back to g8. Bourdonnais is starting to look rather cramped in the corner here. Can McDonnell keep up the pressure? Well, he tries with bishop to d1, adding some more power to this diagonal, and Bourdonnais retreats onto the back rank. He's got so many pieces on the back rank, he's only got 2 out the front, and McDonnell continues to pile on the pressure with h4 and another retreat from Bourdonnais. h5 getting very close now, and Bourdonnais finally tries to mount a defense. He pushes a pawn, the pawn captures, the bishop captures back, but now McDonnell has got a semi-open file which he immediately puts the queen on. Bishop to b6 now, trying to x-ray all the pieces down here, but is it enough to have some counterplay? McDonnell thinks not. He brings the knight up to f3. Queen to f7 and another piece heading towards the king, knight to g3. Bourdonnais plays his back rank knight to e7. Perhaps he wasn't cramped in the corner after all. Perhaps he was more like a coiled spring ready to release. McDonnell brings the rook across to d2 to add a defender to this pawn, and the king gets out of the line of sight of the queen. McDonnell plays knight to h4, threatening this bishop, but Bourdonnais doesn't do anything about this for now. Instead, he decides to sacrifice a knight. But not really, because if the pawn captures, you're losing the bishop, and if the other pawn captures, well, let's just do this, because that's actually what happened in the game. Bourdonnais pushes the pawn to f4 and forks these 2 pieces. So which of the 2 is McDonnell going to save? Well, neither for now. He instead captures the bishop and the knight captures back here, and he brings the other knight into h5. He's deciding to save the knight and give up the bishop, so Bourdonnais captures, which threatens the rook, but first McDonnell brings the knight into f7. That's not f7, f6, which of course is check. The king has to move and McDonnell saves his rook. Bourdonnais tries to give up his rook, moving it into the path of the knight. He wants to try to relieve some of the pressure on his king side, but McDonnell isn't buying it. He wants to keep up the pressure, of course, and he plays rook to g3, which is a bit of a mistake because it blocks the queen's path to f4, which the knight is wanting to come into. Perhaps a better move would have been queen to g3 to keep an eye on everything. But Bourdonnais does indeed jump into f4, and now this is unfortunate for McDonnell because he would have liked to take this pawn with the right-hand rook so that the left-hand rook could keep an eye on the d pawn. Now this pawn will be forced to take the e pawn. It can't move here because of the rook coming down the open file, and it can't move here because of course the pawn is attacking, so it's forced to capture. And here begins a series of blunders from both players. Who will come out on top? Let's see. Bourdonnais could capture the pawn here and go on to threaten the rook, but he decides to save his own rook first and brings it up to g7, which is a big blunder, and I'll show you why. McDonnell has rook to c3 here to threaten this rook, and Bourdonnais can't just leave this under attack. There are many options, all of them are bad, but I'll show you just a couple of them quickly. Baldrick says that from the pond to the stream, Philistines will P, maybe capturing with the rook is okay, so let's try that first. The white rook recaptures and now threatens a check on the back rank, so you're going to want to bring the knight back to help the defense. Then after the check, the knight comes back to block, but now it's pinned and there's all sorts of horrible threats going on here. The pawn can advance as well, the bishop can come in. The pressure is just going to be too much for Bourdonnais and he's going to fall very quickly, so maybe not the best idea, Baldrick. Let's try just one more. How about if the rook comes forward and defends itself with the pawn? Well, the rook's just going to capture anyway. The pawn recaptures, and now this rook is coming across to f3, revealing a double attack upon the knight. You're going to want to save the knight, but now this knight is coming to h5, and the rook is defended by the bishop, but now the attack upon the queen is revealed, and you're going to want to save the queen, but the rook is lost, the queen recaptures, and you can see that McDonnell is clearly winning on material. He has a rook for a knight. So, yeah, if we go back to where we left the position, McDonnell did not play this rook to c3 move. Instead, he played a terrible blunder, which was rook to f3. Of course, he's threatening the knight, but in the meantime, Bourdonnais has bishop captures on d4. And if you capture the knight here, the bishop can capture the other pawn and just skewer everything. However, Bourdonnais blunders and doesn't pick up on this. Instead, he brings the rook down to c1 and pins the bishop, which is another horrible blunder. Although this time, McDonnell doesn't miss it. He has a move that is absolutely winning and he sees it. Do you think you can spot it? Have a quick go. You can even pause the video if you like. Well, yeah, I'm sure you spotted it. It was queen to d2, and it's forking the knight and the rook. So what can Le Bourdonnais do here? Well, not very much. He decides to give up the rook for the bishop. This comes with check, and the queen recaptures. And amazingly, after all of the blunders, McDonnell is still in the driving seat. Can he hold on to win the match? Well, let's find out. Le Bourdonnais is, of course, not going to make it easy for him. Knight to h5, and the rook follows, and the knight captures the knight. The rook captures back and threatens the queen, so the queen retreats to e8, and McDonnell doubles up with the queen and the rook. This rook is x-raying the king, so Le Bourdonnais gets it out of the way, and we have queen to f4. Bishop back to d8, threatening the rook, but McDonnell just leaves that alone and doubles up with the queen and the rook on the wing. Le Bourdonnais takes the opportunity to grab the rook, but this is not going to end well because McDonnell is able to capture and generate a passed pawn, which is also threatening the black rook. So Le Bourdonnais gets the rook out of there to c7 on the open file, ready to deliver some desperate checks because he is running out of options here. McDonnell pushes the pawn, and no, Baldrick, you don't want to capture here because the queen is getting in behind and it's going to be over very quickly. So Le Bourdonnais delivers some desperate checks. The king moves out of the way, check again, the king moves out of the way, check again, and once more the king moves out of the way. Here, Le Bourdonnais goes for queen captures on g6, but this is also a terrible idea because rook to g3, and the queen is now pinned against the king. Another check from Le Bourdonnais. So the king moves out of the way, and Le Bourdonnais moves the black king out of the pin, but of course it's far too late and he's lost the queen. The king captures the rook, and the pawn is pushed. Rook desperately back to c8, but now queen to e7, and here Le Bourdonnais finally resigned the game and the match. McDonnell has done it. He's won match 6, 5 games to 4, so let's give him a crown. So very well done indeed to McDonnell coming back and winning this match. The bad news is that this was the last game that they ever played together because shortly after this, Le Bourdonnais was called away on unspecified urgent business. There are some rumours that McDonnell has now become strong enough to beat him consistently, so maybe he ran away to save some face. And there may be some evidence to support this, and it is linked to exactly why McDonnell only played as white 3 times in the last 9 games. I will do a final video in the series to explain about this. But for now, the fact is that Le Bourdonnais came out on top, winning 4 out of the 6 matches, so let's give him an even bigger crown because he very much deserves it. Well done, Le Bourdonnais. I'll see you again next time.